Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Lawyers on the Rocks. The Lawyers on the Rocks are Jeremy Eldridge.
You'll never catch me, copper. Oh, sorry. No, I thought that was my intro.
Adam Crandall. We are hosted by Gideon at Up Next Creative. Jeremy Eldridge practices criminal defense. My name is Kurt Nachman. I handle civil litigation and personal injury matters. Adam Crandall does whatever it is that immigration lawyers do.
Which is wearing hoodie sweatshirts to work 4 days a week, I think.
This week, we are joined
Casual
by
Monday through Friday.
Kimberly Prescott of Prescott HR. Also, the podcast. What's your podcast name, Kimberly?
HR and Cocktails.
HR and Cocktails. So the Gauntlet, we had a show prep meeting earlier this week. So we're drinking old fashions with the regular Luxardo cherries, although the fantastic Luxardo cherries. And then with the Gauntlet having been thrown down in our prep meeting earlier this week, you are sampling what?
I have an elderberry gin and tonic. You can't see it, but this glass does have a print symbol etching on it. So it's a gin, Empress gin, tonic, aromatic tonics, and Saint Germain.
It's like you don't challenge Mark McGuire on steroids to a home run contest. So I know in our pre-podcast meeting, which sounds very professional, I decided to talk a little bit of shit. Since I look like I come from Prohibition era. And clearly we decided to just get up and hit a slap single, and Kim showed up and hit a fucking home run. So I'm not surprised I'm outdone by someone in HR, but I'm not surprised that HR goes well with cocktails either. If there are two subjects that go well with liquor, it's HR and being a lawyer.
And the law.
Yes. And I do appreciate your baseball analogy because I'm a Nationals fan, so I can proudly say that I watch baseball. Yeah.
So which came first, Lawyers on the Rocks or HR and Cocktails?
I don't know. I think yours.
We started in 1927.
Yeah, I'm actually came back and forward in time. This is Back to the Future 4 podcasting publicly. No, we've been around. We have 400 episodes. So most of them we were doing like some of the old Bad Boy albums where I was rapping or podcasting from jail. So there's just not as good audio.
Yeah, but the pictures were awesome, though, I'm sure. Like the Polaroids from the podcast were awesome.
Not where I thought you were going to go with that. You fit in very well here. Now, I will say I'm very excited because, I made this joke and unfortunately, Kim's podcast isn't on there because I know it's more of a Baltimore thing, but they're having Best Podcast of the Year awards. And I made everyone that I asked for free legal advice. I said, if you even called me for free legal advice, you better vote, which I know is obviously quid pro quo. But I said, you have to vote for us. So, in that same vein, it's nice to talk to another professional that I know gets called all the time and asks free advice. And I figured what better way to not pay a professional HR consultant than just invite her on the podcast. So a good place to start would be by telling you that both of these men sexually harass me frequently.
Okay.
And, I just want, by the end of the show, I'd like to know a better way of dealing with it.
Yeah, it's all about consent. We'll just start there. Okay.
Do you just want to take my spot on the show?
It's not
funnier than
basically
me?
she said it's not harassment if you like it, Jerry.
Well, here's an
Here's
an important HR related question, Jeremy. And this is posed to you, Kimberly. If you leave your computer unlocked and your background gets changed, is that fair play or is that a violation of the office's computer authorization policy?
Well, that's a good question. I would say that as long as no confidential information was accessed, that the actual individual in violation is the one who left their computer unlocked.
Likewise, animal genitalia is different than human genitalia if it's left on a computer screen, right?
Like
I do not even understand the context of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was a good answer. So, Kim, thank you for letting us dig a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I am the president and owner of Prescott HR. We are an outsourced human resources consulting firm. And what that means, because HR is, it's like boiling the ocean. For us, it means we provide outsourced fractional HR director and VP services for organizations that are either too small to have their owned HR department or are just really wanting to upskill their HR strategy and want to bring someone in to assist them with that. So that's what we do. We service clients throughout the Mid-Atlantic.
And I'm guessing because of COVID, you probably haven't been busy at all. no one's calling with any sort of COVID related questions for HR, right?
Yeah, no one's asking for liability waivers and how to lay off people. Absolutely not. No.
Now, I feel like we cheated a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we should not have sent you these HR scenarios that we wanted to go through with you.
I didn't
So-
read them, if that helps you.
Now you sound like me preparing for the podcast.
You'll fit in perfectly here.
The only joke that we're forbidden from making, I'll say, is as long as you can flip or read double-sided paperwork, you'll fit in better than Adam.
Yeah. I only pay attention every other episode of the show, every other segment.
So I'm gonna work backwards with you,
Okay.
having a little bit of fun,
Okay.
and then moving to the more serious COVID topics.
Okay. Okay.
Well, can I get? We've got a ton of viewers, all 5 of them, but we do have. I do want to get before
He
we
means
get into
500. I tell him
Yeah,
to.
500,
I tell him to
500.
minimize.
Yeah.
We do have several attorneys on there, including Mitch Greenberg, who says, "I'm a professional background changer, and baboon nuts are in fact fair game."
Okay.
That's what I was saying. I prefer chimps, Mitch. But if you're a baboon guy, to each his own. Notice that the Jewish guys are all choosing monkeys or member of the chimpanzee or ape family, which probably says a lot about us being. This is getting really awkward.
Well,
hairy Jews.
really, what it says to me is, do you prefer hair or no hair? That's actually what I was thinking.
Yeah.
God, if she's better than a lawyer. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
it's like a lawyer who actually knows what they're talking about. Wow. Sorry, as you can see, I don't know whether this is possible, but could you just make a meme out of me when we're done so I can be known as a walking HR problem? Like looking up in the dictionary. No, this is what an HR issue is. So we have some funny questions, some of which are a little more serious and come from absolutely no personal experience either here at the Office of the State's Attorney for Baltimore City, where Kurt and I are employed, while Adam was in ICE detention because he's Canadian, or when Gideon died and then was reincarnated.
Okay.
All right. Number 1, can you mandate hygiene in the workplace due to someone's not so wonderful body odor and or smell?
Yes. And as is the case with anything, your attorneys, that there's always the, ADA challenge, is this person taking medication? Do they have a medical condition? So barring any of those issues, the answer is yes, you can absolutely do that. And as the HR person, I will not have that conversation for you. It's your job, manager, to tell your own employees that they don't smell good.
Likewise. If
You mean we
that
can't
same-
out? That's basically what we want to outsource.
Yeah,
Are you
didn't
kidding
she
me?
just say he was like outside general counsel?
Yeah, really.
Well, likewise, if that same coworker continues to walk around in the office shoeless,
Mhm.
can you mandate wearing shoes or the type of shoe?
You can do both, actually. I mean, it can be a safety issue to walk around without shoes, first of all, but it's probably against the dress code. And it's probably, and depending on the work environment, it could be a safety issue to mandate the type of shoe, like, steel toe shoe, no open toe shoes, et cetera. So you absolutely can. But more importantly, I think that it's important to mandate whether or not they're going to have a pedicure. That's important. And
That's
more
a good
importantly,
answer.
crusty heels are not acceptable. And I will also say that no matter who you are, everyone needs lotion.
Now, if you're going with crusty heels, does that also include ashy elbows?
It absolutely involves ashy elbows, which goes right to my point of no matter who you are, you need lotion.
Okay, so gentlemen, if anyone's taking notes, we need a lotion subsection.
Or just like shoes and sleeves.
Does it put the lotion on its
Yeah.
skin?
Oh no!
Or get
Can you
it
put the
together?
lotion in the basket? That's the
Yes,
ultimate
it puts
question.
the lotion in the basket. Yes, yes, yes,
All right,
yes.
now that was a softball. Let's
Okay.
make it harder for you.
All right.
What do you do if someone steals your snacks or lunch out of the office refrigerator and it has your name on it? It says Kimberly Prescott and it's gone.
Yes. Oh man, this one is interesting. Unless you have cameras, if I walk past your desk and you're clearly eating my lunch with my name on it, that's
Oh, my yogurt with my spoon.
Well, let's take that scenario first. In that scenario, you walk by Jeremy's office and he's going to town on your sandwich
yeah.
that you left in the fridge.
Eating your
Yeah.
banana.
What do you do in that case?
make a mental note and I make sure to put something special in my lunch for him tomorrow.
Yes.
We can
Yes.
actually do that. That's the part that I thought was illegal.
Yes. I love retaliatory HR.
Oh, this is great. Now these other questions are going to be so soft now. I was looking for permission here. All right. How does medical marijuana card affect an employer or employee issues now that marijuana is decriminalized or legal with a marijuana card?
A real question. Sorry. Throwing a real question.
We got to mix them in and out just to see. 'Cause now that I know you didn't read them, we're just throwing hard shit at you.
I know. For me, it doesn't matter because if you have a drug and alcohol free workplace, you have a drug and alcohol free workplace. So it can't dictate what people can be under the influence at work. And if you don't regularly drug test people, then it just doesn't matter. I just feel like it's none of your business, employer. Just don't worry about it. And if it's medicinal, then it's medicinal. Like people take barbiturates legally, people do certain things. I mean, they take them illegally as well, but I prefer to have my employers, if they're not in safety sensitive jobs, just not even concern themselves about it, because it's a slippery slope. They don't even need to go down. I mean, unless the person comes in, smelling like, whole tree,
like our clients.
Like our clients.
Like our clients.
Beat me to it.
Is there an echo? Like our clients. Like John and Natalie and Mai and Adams and Kurtz and Kate's. And do we have any other lawyers here I'm forgetting about?
Yeah. Gideon's clients.
Gideon's clients.
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question there, which is, what if there is a drug testing policy, but you have a medical card? Is that an exception to the rule?
So without getting extremely nerdy, the medical review officer at the drug testing facility is supposed to request that before sending over the positive drug test. If they have that card, the employer should get a negative result.
Interesting.
Oh, because they
wow.
ask for their prescriptions
Interesting.
prior to
Okay.
doing the test.
Correct.
Which is the same thing when you're on probation.
Correct.
Which is a similar thing.
Interesting.
Well, and just to note that, because that's a newer concept, is if you're on probation in the state of Maryland and you have a medical marijuana card, or you're even, for the broader issue before this was if you have ADHD and you're prescribed any sort of ADHD drugs that'll test positive for any of the methyls, same sort of thing, or barbiturates as you brought up.
Yes.
Here we go. Is it better? We're going to mix them up and go funny, not funny. Is it
Okay.
better to tell someone off in an email or by phone?
Well, come on now. That's super
That's a
easy.
Shantae Eldridge, listener Shantae Eldridge,
Yeah.
who has no relationship to Jeremy Eldridge.
Yeah.
And you don't know at all. You don't know this woman.
No.
She wants to know, is it better to tell that bitch off on the phone
Yes.
or tell that motherfucker off in an email?
Yeah, so I'm gonna tell you right now, the way that you do it most effectively is always going to be on the phone. Better in person because they can really see your facial expression and see all the veins that pop out in your head. But if that's not possible, you can do it on the phone, and then you follow up with a nice text message. It was really nice talking to you today.
Oh my
Well,
God,
that's
she's
perfect.
so good. And we forgot to ask telling them off by video.
Video.
Kurt and I came up with a lot of these. The funnier ones were Kurt's, honestly. We
Yeah.
forgot by video. That was our fault.
No,
Thank you.
I think that's great. And on that point too, I mean, you don't want to leave a paper trail, because then like a couple of days later, when the employee's like, well, don't you remember when you said that shit to me? You'd be like, I never said that.
Yeah.
That reminds me of what you guys keep talking about when people get arrested, that they just need to shut up.
Yeah.
It's like in the same vein, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't write it down.
No, the difference though is Kimberly's suggestion of saying it was really nice talking to you.
That is some,
Because then it makes it so much more difficult for the
serious
person to
snark.
go,
yeah.
yeah, it's like, of course I sent them a text. I thought we had a great conversation. I don't know where any of this animosity is
That's
coming
not
from.
even passive aggressive. That's just fucking aggressive. I love
That's
it.
it's an alibi. What are you
Yeah.
talking? I mean, that's
Yeah.
Exactly.
all this is showing me is I really haven't put enough thought into what I do for a living.
Oh, you're
I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
I'll admit
Well,
it.
I
So
will
I
be
wanna throw
honest.
out-
Being in HR, you learn how to be passively aggressively petty, and that's
Have you TM'd that one out of
I
curiosity?
should
Passively
aggressively petty. I should. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Need the
t-shirt.
t-shirt.
Oh, 100. I feel like that's me. Like I've always just referred to myself as a whiny bitch, but like I am definitely passively aggressively petty. I feel like I just got diagnosed by a licensed psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Well, you know,
question-
HR people are psychotherapists too, right?
Oh, here we go. She's
Yeah.
like me. I'm Jewish. I think I'm a doctor. She's a psychotherapist. Okay.
So let's ask some legit COVID questions. Can
Mhm.
you, and I know the answer to some of these, can you mandate your employees get the vaccine?
The answer is technically you could, but there are so many loopholes in it. It's kind of like employment at will. I talk about employment at will as being Swiss cheese. There's so many holes in it, it just really kind of doesn't exist. Very similarly, the EEOC, with all of its awesomeness, not really, has given some guidance on that. And it's similar to the flu shot guidance. You can. However, if someone has a medical reason not to, a closely held belief, for the reason why they don't want to, which you can't ask any questions about closely held beliefs. So yeah, that could be anything. So technically I would say yes, but again, if you're not going to enforce it, and if you are going to enforce it, you're going to enforce it for everyone. So it's just so many things. If you don't have a work environment that's would require it, such as a healthcare environment, I don't necessarily know that it would be a place that you'd want to necessarily put yourself to require it.
So if you don't mind, let me follow up on this because it's just in the news in the last day. I saw yesterday at another university today, University of Maryland is going to require not only students coming back to campus in the fall, but all faculty and staff.
Hopkins as well, I believe.
Yeah. So this is, I think we saw this coming. And I don't know, from your perspective, Kimberly, is there a difference with a state agency university in that regard versus, a private business like us, or is basically the same sort of standards apply?
Well, two things. The state and federal government make laws and then they don't apply to their own employees. So that's the first thing. But then the second thing is it depends, because in certain instances, those organizations are represented by unions and they're under collective bargaining agreement. So there could be some implications for that. But outside of that, I would say, even if they're not, most of the schools are quasi-state, correct? To some extent.
Yes.
So there very well could be some different regulations for them. I mean, they play by their own rules, to be honest. So it could be some exclusion for the public sector that doesn't apply to the private sector. But
Given the fact that the CARE Act ended in December, so we're not seeing the sort of continuing mandated sick leave for employees, for instance, where do you sort of envision us going, as seeing as how we're not done COVID, and I apologize if I don't remember the full name of the act, but
yeah,
I believe it was the CARE Act that said to employers, you must provide sick leave, similar to FMLA.
correct.
And so now that act is ended and not renewed, where do you envision that going?
Well, technically, it's still in force, but it's voluntary. So employers can choose to comply with it, and they would have to comply with it if they want to continue to get their tax credit for the time off.
Oh, okay. Well, money actually does help. I thought that was going to be a more morose answer.
Yeah, no. They have to extend the leave if they want to continue to get the tax credit. But with that, I think that a lot of employers they're considering different things. I hear so many different questions. The main question that I hear, and one of the things that did not pass through Annapolis this year, was about liability waivers, and really just, whether or not they can say, all right, you don't have to get vaccinated, you can come back to work, but just don't sue me. So I think those are really the things that people are thinking about, more so than the leave as much, because they've adapted to the leave, they've adapted to the remote work. Hopefully schools will be going back in the fall. So I think it's really more around the practical nature of bringing people back into work, and quite honestly, people who don't want to come to work, how are they going to address that?
So I want to throw it out to our listeners. If there's any questions, I'm monitoring the comments here. I see we do actually have a real legitimate number of listeners today. Well, Jeremy,
it's like he's rooting for us to fail.
I am. Well, Jeremy goes through the few
entertaining
sexually harassing questions that he has.
Okay.
I like how these were purposefully left for me.
The Jeremy docket.
It's hard being a victim.
It's the Eldridge docket.
Jeremy
Eldridge docket.
What actually constitutes sexual harassment?
Wait, what was that?
I said,
was that?
what actually constitutes sexual harassment?
Yes. Well, the nerdy answer is it has to be severe and pervasive, right? But it's also some of it is perception and impact. So it could be any unwelcome, touching comments, emails, text messages, all the things. Yeah, all the things. And in this instance, it could be a conversation, and you can be sexually harassed in conversation. It doesn't have to be in writing. So, so it could be anything that's anything that's unwelcomed of a sexual nature. It doesn't necessarily have to be quid pro quo sexual harassment. It could be, words, language, touching. It
So
could be,
frequently telling me that I'm an otter in the workplace would be sexual harassment. I'm an otter, a small bear. That's
No, but
sexual
if
harassment.
it's true, it's not sexual harassment, right?
This isn't
Isn't that what you just
defamation,
said?
right? She's saying it's not defamation. There's a difference. Truth is a defense. I'm not an otter.
Oh.
so I am not familiar with that vernacular.
That was such a good answer. I feel like this is why now in full disclosure, I met Kim at the Laurel Historical Society Gala through my older sister, Jana. And since that time, Kimberly and my wife, Shantae, have become friends. And I feel like you were prepared a little bit more so than you should have been for this podcast.
This is
Even though
me.
you're saying you didn't read the show notes. Well, if this is you, you're really fucking good at your job, and I will gladly recommend you to everyone we know. So we got a couple others here. One more curveball. We got a couple others.
Okay.
Now, I know you said drug and alcohol-free workplace, but what about if I'm Rastafari? And part of my religion, part of my closely held beliefs are me eating a gummy bear every 4 hours to maintain my legitimate high.
Yeah.
May I do that as practicing Rastafarianism? If they are gummy bears shaped like Bob Marley with long dreads, and they're beautiful little gummies in different
not a
colors,
real religion.
mostly green, sometimes yellow, and always red, representing the
Yeah,
chosen.
absolutely.
That's not a gummy bear. That's a gummy bob.
It's a gummy Bob. I
love
apologize.
it.
It was a gummy Bob Marley,
Yes.
Robert Marley.
My strong recommendation for individuals who want to partake in that way would be to not let me know. Because to the extent that I am aware, and we have a drug and alcohol free workplace policy, closely held beliefs do not override us having a policy that says you cannot be under the influence at work. It would only be if it was for medicinal purposes. So if it was for medicinal purposes, then we would, look to, ADA, blah, 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 other things. But you having a closely held belief, I don't have to make an accommodation for that from a drug and alcohol-free workplace perspective. I'm not required to do that. I'm not required to make that accommodation.
If you are at your second day at work and you fall asleep, you wake up, you do a job interview on the phone in another language, you then fall asleep and your wig falls off.
Yeah.
Can you be terminated for that reason?
You forgot the part where she cried.
I'm sorry. She also cried.
This is not, by the way, this is a hypothetical scenario.
Well, I was
And
going to say that
really
sounds like
hypothetical.
something that happened to me.
No, her wig fell off when she woke up
Yeah.
because it jerked her awake, hypothetically.
Yeah.
That's
then-
not what caused her to cry.
And then she cried. And then she did
Yeah.
a job interview,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically.
Yeah.
Is that grounds for termination?
Yeah, like that's crazy. I'd have a few questions, to be honest. I would
Yeah,
need to
come
know
on.
how you got on the floor, okay, and how you went to sleep.
Way to point
less
fingers
concerned
there.
about- Yeah, I'm less concerned about your wig because we can address that. We can get you some.
No, the
good-
wig was funny.
Yeah,
We
the
should
wig
not have
is
given
fine.
her gummy Bob Marleys. That's
Yeah,
what it was.
yeah. So we can definitely get her some good glue spray, not Gorilla Glue, because that's not okay for your hair. But we could definitely address that. But I would need to know how she got on the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have
Now, this is a very, very,
Hypothetically.
very delicate question.
Mhm,
This is very serious.
mhm.
This may have happened or didn't happen, hypothetically.
It was hypothetical.
Okay.
If somebody works in your office and they don't realize that their boobie popped out,
Wow, Janet Jackson.
Not just
How-
once. No,
Not just once.
not just once,
Hypothetically, if it happened multiple times.
Yeah.
are you allowed to tell them, hey, your
No, the question
Put
really
the,
is,
put the puppies back in the
it's
cage.
not are you allowed, it's how. Like, what's the best way to go about
This
that?
has never happened in a couple years.
We're just looking prospectively here in case
Right,
it does
in
happen
case it
In the
happens.
past,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right, right.
in the
Right.
happened in the past. If it
Okay.
happens.
Well, in that instance, to avoid any discomfort on your part, I would have a female coworker approach that
Good call.
person and address it. And if I was that person, I would let them know that they are exposed and that they would need to go either to the bathroom or very quickly adjust themselves. And then we'd have to find some double-sided tape to make sure that they stay in.
See,
So I played it right. I went to another hypothetically,
in the past,
Hypothetically, you played.
but in the future.
were this to happen in the future, I would have gone to another employee and asked them to handle that.
Yes,
that
and it
shit.
was also inappropriate, hypothetically, for you to wear
Bike shorts.
bagosh overalls with no shirt on to the office.
Really?
No, I don't agree
That's
with
not
that.
Yeah. Steve,
shirtless
Thank you.
overalls to the office.
Thank you.
Do you have a shirts required policy?
Nope.
Yeah.
I've been sexist. I
Our dress
apologize.
code
Apparently.
is
Thank
dress appropriately.
Well,
That's
this is
so
the-
lax.
We'll
any
go
sort of
back to the
specificity.
FCC. The FCC has deemed that shirtless women are inappropriate and shirtless men are not. So we'll just
Thank you.
follow federal guidance.
Which
Thank you.
All this is showing is that I would like to schedule a consultation with Prescott HR after this podcast is done. Neither of you are helping. That's all. I don't have anything else good to throw at her.
So
I thought
unfortunately,
I thought we were better than this.
We legit have a number of listeners, and none of them have given us good commentary. But I have spoken to Kimberly about staying on for just one more segment, which is
Ooh.
very important.
It's a good one.
It's this week's,
yes.
it's
yes,
this week's segment of I can't believe it's not Baltimore, and this has been a very popular topic.
Okay.
Italian. Okay. So again, as we discussed in the pre-show, every week we do I can't believe it's not Baltimore, where we read news around the world and usually in Florida.
This is
And
so
we determine
Baltimore.
whether or not it's happened in Baltimore before. In this week's I can't believe it's not Baltimore, Italian hospital employee accused of calling out sick for 15 years. A hospital employee in Italy has been accused of skipping work on full pay for 15 years, local media report. The man is alleged to have stopped turning up at work at the Siacco Hospital in the southern city of Castanzo in 2005.
Catanzaro.
Catanzaro, not Italian.
It's a real place.
He was reportedly paid 538,000 euros over the total years he was thought to have not been working, or approximately 50,000 US dollars a year. 6 managers at the hospital are also being investigated in connection with the absenteeism. Arrests are a result of the lengthy police investigation into absenteeism and suspected fraud in the Italian public sector. The employee was a civil servant, assigned a job in the hospital in 2005. Then he just stopped going. Police accused him of threatening his manager to stop her from filing a disciplinary report against him.
I'm surprised he knew who his manager was.
The manager retired, and then his ongoing absence was never noticed by anyone else.
Retired.
Her successor, or most importantly to our conversation, human resources.
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, this is not for 15 years, but I know for a fact that it's happened in Baltimore because I investigated an allegation of someone who did not show up for work and got paid for years for Baltimore City government.
Oh, this happened at the Department of Public Works. My wife caught people and turned them in that were saying they were working, but there were GPS on their cars and proved that they weren't working. I mean, this story couldn't be more Baltimore. It's just here. It's Italy, so it's like feels very mafioso.
It rings a little Milton from Office Space in my mind too. Like,
Yes.
it's like,
Have you seen my stapler?
well, I mean, obviously he would show up for work every day, even though no one wanted him there. But when the manager leaves and then they're just like, no one noticed that this person was still getting a paycheck, it kind of rings a little bit like that. Like, my stapler.
So is this okay?
Well, I guess the first question that I would have is from a health and welfare perspective, why did no one check on him for 15 years? He could have been dead in his house.
Even
Somebody
better.
was
Didn't
dead in
even
their
think about
house at the end of the story. I don't understand how he didn't run out of sick days. Like there's so many issues with this that like,
It's Italy, man. You don't run out of, and when they
Yeah.
what do
just
you mean
had
you
him
don't run out of sick days?
they didn't have him on sick days.
He wasn't on
just
sick
was getting
leave.
paid. He wasn't on sick leave.
Somebody was punching him in every day, punching his time card every day.
There was just he just missed all the office parties. He missed all the Christmas parties and the holiday parties and the 4th of July.
I'm just
celebration.
impressed that after 15 years, when he was about to get turned in, he still had the gall to threaten the person that was going to write the report,
Yeah.
which only says this guy's got a little bit of juice. He's got
Yeah.
some.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a professional legal term, by the way. A professional legal term. He's got big balls.
I'm
Yeah.
guessing this was a fairly large company because I'm imagining like, you know, a little corner store bakery. That's not going to happen.
It was a hospital.
Yeah.
Oh,
A lot
right.
of employees. To
He
keep
was
track of.
actually the head of surgery.
Yeah. They only discovered it when COVID hit and they didn't have anybody to care for the patients.
What they're not saying here, though, that I think you have to read, through the lines, which isn't difficult because it's so patently obvious, is there's 6 managers at the hospital that are being investigated. So the question is, first of all, he's obviously not the only one,
Right.
right? There are obviously other ghost payees, so people that don't exist that are getting paychecks, and then other people are cashing them, which happens all the time everywhere. Like him, a real person, and then where's that money being funneled to? Who's profiting from this? But if 6 people have been arrested, it's not just one guy getting $50K a year. It's obviously a whole lot more than that, and people are just sort of embezzling money from the hospital system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely more than just someone getting missed on payroll and not being terminated. If there are arrests, it's definitely more than that.
So we didn't ask you the one question from earlier that kind of pertains to the story, which is if you're brought in as HR and you are representing the agency, so to speak, and they are part of a criminal investigation, so you know that the police are coming in, what sort of general advice or parameters can you give as far as how that goes down, given your experience?
Yeah, the first thing I will tell them is don't delete anything and don't throw anything away. And then the next thing is really to understand what is the standard procedure when someone is out sick, on leave, or gets terminated. Because ultimately, I want to find one person to just throw under the bus and just be like, you know what, police, here you go. This is our rogue manager. Have them. And I don't want the whole organization to go down.
You
if we
mean
don't
the
have to.
orderly driving the Maserati?
Who's it going to be, guys?
Don't even look at me. I'm the criminal defense attorney here. I will find a way out. I got a Giancarlo Esposito. You don't have to worry about me.
Now
Yeah.
I feel like I got a target on my back.
We'll just deport you. Like I always said, back to British Columbia for you. Back to
Always
Vancouver, boy.
Always have documented practices. That way you can just blame somebody for not following them.
That's usually why
That's
Kurt's
some-
laughing because that's what he
some
does to
legit
us.
HR. Yeah, buddy.
Kim, so do you want to take Kurt's spot?
Do I like
As managing partner here, Kurt unfortunately has been, because it's really best because he's the tallest. That's usually the rubric here is if you're the tallest, you get to decide what the HR issue is.
Mm,
It's a very caveman mentality. Like if I can beat you up, I get to decide what the rules are. So
okay.
maybe it's an idea. Maybe we should revolutionize the way we do HR. I'd like a new employee handbook. Maybe
Would
some
you-
coloring book pages in there. Maybe a pop-up picture.
That would be awesome. And then you'd read it.
Don't make me caveman you.
I heard you. I can
Oh,
hear you. I can hear
sorry.
you, Kim. You're not on
Sorry,
mute.
I thought I was on
Did you
mute.
hear she say that I'd actually read it? That's the Kurt does read. Kurt does read.
So tell us a little bit about your drink before you jump off.
Yes.
Tasting notes, please.
Yes, tasting notes. So it's aromatic tonic. So it has some aromatic notes. And then there's elderberry and then Empress gin, which I love gin. A lot of people don't love gin, but I do. So it is, it's strong because I wanted it to be really purple. So I am drinking it slowly. But it's actually quite tasty. If you like a French 75, it's very similar to a French 75.
If I would have known what a big fan of gin you were, I would have suggested that we have done a gin old fashioned because that is actually my favorite drink.
Mhm.
The elder.
Right. But then you would have tried to outdo me on that. And I would just, yeah.
and then I would have lost again. It's okay. I have no problems being second to you. I'm very comfortable with that. No problems. And I think we're going to have you on again because there's no better way to continue to reap advice about things that never happened at the law offices of Eldridge, Knockman and Crandall LLC, and to avoid complaints with the Attorney Grievance Commission by having HR.
And you're
on
the
your
one that wanted
podcast.
the AGC to come on our show, by the way.
I don't
just
run.
wanna throw that
Let me
out
just
there.
tell you, better. I don't run from wolves, man.
So, Kimberly, tell us where to find your business, and then also tell us where to find your podcast, please.
Yes. So you can find my business at www.prescotthr.com. And you can also find a link to our podcast on the website, or it's on any streaming service such as Apple, Google, Spotify. You can find it there. HR and cocktails, ampersand. You can find it there.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for
Thank you
joining
so
us.
much
Yeah,
for joining us.
Thank you for
Have a
having
great
me. Have a
weekend,
great
Kimberly.
I
Friday.
feel so much
Cheers.
safer with you here.
Well, I'm leaving. So there you
About
go.
to get real.
Exactly. Have a nice day.
So,
Now,
need
am I
another
supposed to be
drink.
more appropriate or less appropriate? Now I'm worried. I feel like she's still watching me. Kim
This
is
was-
the closest thing to
yeah.
having my wife on this podcast. Like if anyone here has met my wife, they know, but she's about as close as they get. I know. I'm all fucking nervous.
Can we do another round?
We're going
Is
to
that
need
okay?
another round.
Wait, can I know? Clarissa's in the room. You can't see her from the viewers. Can you tell us what whiskeys you used to mix our old fashions today? Okay. Uh-huh.
You can just step in
What
front of
else?
the camera here. Our fearless associate,
I can't hear her.
fearless
Winchester.
Winchester.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And what's the other one? Where is it from? Where?
Arkansas. Arkansas, it's called. Pig Suey. Is that Pig Suey?
Big Suey.
Pig Suey.
Ooh, Big Suey. The Rocktown was from an episode a ways back. We're tearing through the rest of the liquor cabinet, folks.
Nothing
Not
says
gonna lie
alcoholic by finishing the rest of the bottles that are left.
No, I'm good.
Nothing is a good, nothing
All right.
makes a good old
Just a whiskey.
fashioned when you're in a pinch, like some good Rocktown, Arkansas whiskey.
So that was a great guest.
We're still
have-
on, we're still live.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi.
Yeah, it's
So
happening.
Oh, I thought we were kicking into like afterwards when we sit around and just shoot the shit. Like, damn, y'all, that was a good show.
Oh, it's like an HBO show where we sit around afterwards talking about the show we just watched.
the
to see if we
BTS,
like
the behind
show.
the scenes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what?
exactly
You know
what
what,
it
Well,
is.
I
Hold
think
on,
maybe
hold on. This story. Hold on.
Oh,
Our
oh.
next story is kind of a little bit of behind the scenes.
I'm gonna need a fluffer before
I
we start
busted
this
up
next
Kurt's
segment.
segue. Sorry, go ahead.
no, but
What
my
you got?
point is maybe we need some transition music between the guests and the rest of the podcast,
I just did that. I played Pig Suey. Well, I'll just do that on every episode.
or something else.
Well, let's go with or something else for 100. Gideon.
So a little bit of behind the scenes on how immigration cases work. Immigration official charged with immigration fraud. When Adam and Jeremy say they handle immigration matters, this isn't exactly what they meant.
Oh, this is exactly what we meant.
An immigration services officer with USCIS was arrested in Maryland on a federal charge that he obtained United States citizenship under a false name. The defendant is charged under the false name of Carl Mbagudu Udiki Ifemembi. But the criminal complaint in this case notes his real name is Modestus Mbagduwu Ifemembi,
Catanzaro, Kurt. Catanzaro.
originally from Nigeria.
And Italy by way of Catanzaro.
Ifembi, who previously resided in California but has recently relocated to Rockville, Maryland last year, worked for USCIS for 7 years. He's charged with one count in the complaint of unlawfully procuring United States citizenship. He made false statements on various government forms in order to obtain citizenship as well as employment with USCIS. He first entered the United States in 2000 when he flew from France to Chicago with a British passport that had been issued to another person but displayed his photograph.
Which conveniently is also my alias, Carlos Mumphy.
So
The name of Eddie Murphy and the Golden Child.
he admitted his use of the UK passport, the affidavit states. Ultimately, he was granted asylum after falsely claiming his real name was Carlos Mumfi.
Morphe.
Mumphy.
No, it needs to be Murphy.
It's Mumphy.
It's Murphy.
Morphe.
Like I said,
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I want the knife.
Oh, thank you.
This is great. Thank you for the drink.
He was a native and said that he was a native of Sierra Leone. After being granted asylum, he attended University of California, Berkeley. Which,
hard
of
school
course,
to get into.
gave him a bachelor's degree. Then he got a JD from Oregon School of Law.
Also,
Then,
not a super easy school to get into.
in
Right.
late 2010, Carlos Mumfi
Morphe.
Mumphy.
applied for U.S. citizenship, asked for his name to be changed to Imefebi.
Ifemembi.
Ifemembi. Thank you.
Say it with me, Kurt.
Ife?
Membi.
Oh God,
Membi.
this is welcome to an episode of Immigration Lawyers teaching white men how to read.
Adam knows how to
Follow
say
me as I
everybody's
say
name.
African names, and you're white, and you will learn how to pronounce them.
Yeah.
His name was T'Challa.
During the investigation,
AKA
federal
Black
investigators got
Panther.
an all-expense paid trip to Africa, including his
Fucking
hometown
course.
of Akuma, Nigeria. They searched his Orange County residence in 2019, obtaining evidence about his true identity,
He kept it all those years.
including baptism, school, and financial records. Why the fuck would you keep that shit? What is
Look, let's cut directly to the chase. All right. And this happened. He's in Greenbelt. This is charged out of Greenbelt.
this?
So
This could be a Jeremy Eldridge.
Cut
federal
directly
jail
to
case.
the Mumphy.
So I looked it up. I could not tell. This came from a DOJ press release.
Yes, it did.
I tried to Google him, like an image search, to see if I recognized him. The image that came up.
Okay,
I don't
well,
know if
hold
it's
on.
the correct
Can you
Ethan
back up?
Nimbe, but I don't know if it's. I don't recognize him from Baltimore. I was
Can you
really hoping to
back
recognize him
up
from Baltimore.
a step and talk to our listeners about what USCIS is
Yeah, sure.
and what they do.
Well, I mean, look, what I was going to say, to cut to the chase, this is the equivalent of robbing the bank and then showing up the next day and applying for a job as a fucking teller. So he committed. That's a good analogy.
I mean, I
Jeremy.
was
Don't
thinking.
shake your head.
No, I wasn't mad
It's
at you.
real
That,
good.
that was
It's
actually better
real
than I was
good.
thinking of.
I
because
practiced that one before I came.
That
in
was
here.
it was good.
It's real.
It was
good.
actually pretty perfect.
So USCIS is the agency that handles all affirmative immigration benefit applications. So you have a spouse, you want your spouse to be a permanent resident, you apply through USCIS.
because you're in love.
You want to request asylum in the United States, you file through USCIS, the asylum office. So this is exactly what this guy did. He came over. It's a little curious to me, although it's 2000. So this was, pre-DHS. This was old INS.
Oh, that's what I was wondering.
And it is interesting to me that although it's fairly common. I mean, he entered on a UK passport through France, claimed asylum from Sierra Leone, even though he was from Nigeria. That fact pattern to an immigration attorney
Red flag.
sounds about fucking right.
You know what's weird about this?
Sounds
is
about fucking right.
if you've ever seen Catch Me If You Can,
yeah.
this
yeah,
was
yeah.
a little bit, and I kind of wondered, and I'm probably bringing a little too much like heart to the story, but when I first read this, when you sent it to me at 4:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, because that's usually when Adam does it, he's either still stoned or waking up.
It's one or the other.
It's A or B, not all the above. My question was this a guy? Because there's no, and let me use my argument here to say there's absolutely no indication in any of the articles, because the one thing I went hunting for was were the schools fake, right? There's no indications that the schools or his graduation was fake. So you obviously know he's an intelligent person.
Absolutely.
So was the effort here to put himself in a position where he could help other people? And it's prosecutable, obviously. But I kind of wondered whether this was a guy who said, you know what? I want to get in there. I'm going to put myself there and I'm going to help people stay here. Not an excuse, as I say to judges,
But
more
that's
of an
not what he's
explanation.
being prosecuted for. You're
It's not what he's
conflating
being-
the two. I mean, look, this is a classic case, and we see it a lot. There's a ton of fraud in immigration. Everybody knows. And it's always that extra bite at the apple that gets people in trouble. So I've represented people, plenty of people over the years who gain asylum, gain residency through a sham marriage, gain residency some other way. And it's like only when you go to apply for citizenship, you're like, I want that motherfucking cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it comes back to get you. And generally speaking, you get caught up in it before you're granted citizenship.
But I'm wondering, but to
this
choose
guy,
this job though,
now that's what I'm saying. You're
that's
conflating
where
the
I'm
two.
going.
To go back, and that's what I'm saying.
He
To
wants
go
help
back
other people
to the
commit.
source.
He wants to help other people commit fraud.
I mean, that's
my cynical.
but
No,
but there's your catch me
but
if
no,
you
but I'm-
can
I'm-
analogy though.
I don't know.
That's what's so fucking crazy about it is that's like well shit, I got away with it. Let me see how far I can push it. Because to me, it's crazy. Like, just get your shit and move on, man. Go work for a bank. Go work. You're a smart guy. Go be a lawyer somewhere. Go set up shop. But he went back into the lion's den. That's some crazy shit.
You
is crazy.
really have to be what we've seen. And so I know this is not the It's Happened in Baltimore segment, but when Kurt and I were both law clerks coming into our early time as a state attorney, I don't know, I'm sure Kurt remembers this. There was an expert that was testifying. He was a CST, or so not crime scene tech, but he was really brought
firearms.
He could talk about
expert.
firearms.
He did pattern recognition. Joe Capera, right?
So in my case, he was talking about matching duct
Joe
tape.
Capera?
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking about duct tape and a kidnapping. So to say that this roll of duct tape was the same duct tape that was used to tie up the victim, and he ended up killing himself. And they found out that he had faked all his college degrees. He had faked his doctorate. He had faked
everything,
with the exception of him being qualified as an expert in like half the courts around the country. So, and interestingly enough, the prosecutor who I was in court with today in quasi late for the podcast was the prosecutor who handled the homicide that he testified in, and no one knew. But it's always interesting to me when people like him or like, Mumphy over here, Mumphy, like I said, Mumphy, they commit all of this fraud only to place themselves in a position
To get fucking caught.
And it's amazing. It is really quite unbelievable.
So here's the nerdy. You guys want the nerdy immigration lawyer
You
aspect of
you
this?
have your blue light glasses on, so whatever nerdy you want to share with us.
The
you're more than
charge of
welcome to.
unlawful procurement of citizenship. I've actually consulted on a case just very similar to this with the Federal Public Defender's Office. And so I the ins and outs of this are familiar to me. The charge of unlawful procurement of citizenship carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. The next line here is not quite right. Upon conviction, U.S. citizenship is automatically revoked. It's not automatic. It's technically a separate sort of procedural issue that the federal judge, the sentencing judge, will have to invoke as part of the proceeding. But that's not the end of the story for him, because once his citizenship is revoked, he's put back in the place he was previously, which is as a lawful permanent resident of the United States, which was fraudulently obtained. So there needs to be an entire removal proceeding that follows this to actually deport him from the United States as having fraudulently obtained his permanent residency. However, there's a waiver available, and he may actually be able to keep his green card and stay in the United
Adam
States.
just came in his pants. I don't know how to say that nicely.
I don't know.
This is an
I don't
immigration
know
lawyer's
any other
wet
way.
dream.
I don't know any other way short of being a fucking ambulance chasing PI attorney to say, Mr. Murphy, hire me. I will represent you in removal proceedings.
Adam is so hot for this case. Like, there's a
This
case
is
where
a
criminal
great
case-
fucking
Also
story.
represent- This is like the inverted crimmigration.
This is a great story. It's a great case.
That's why
And
I put
I
it
think-
in the show notes.
I think he would have an excellent case because it's essentially
Is he detained? Can we get him as a listener? Can I actively
Listen,
solicit him?
once he comes to removal proceedings, it's essentially a fucking discretionary waiver. The guy's got a JD from Oregon. He's a beaver, man. He's got a bachelor's degree from Berkeley.
You know what you don't want in jail? A beaver.
Don't fuck with this guy, man. Don't sleep on this guy. He may be able to keep his green.
Mumphy, if you need a lawyer, you contact enlawyers.com.
Murphy. I will pronounce your name correctly if you hire me.
It's
So,
not his real name.
guys, I've got
Ife
another
Minde.
topic. I got another topic. It's a short story, but it's a long topic, and it's about the Derek Chauvin conviction.
Let's
and
do it.
sort of the appellate issues. I really want to spend more time on it. I think
You want
what
to
do you
kick
think,
it?
Gideon?
I think this is a shorter segment than you think.
I think so too.
And I will tell you why. Because the basis for your article, and we can do it right now, is whether the comments made by people like Congresswoman Maxine Waters, President Joe Biden, and other individuals who decided to weigh in, prior to the verdict.
And the $27 million settlement that was announced by
Correct.
the city
That too.
went on the day that the jury was impaneled.
Yes. Okay. So what I've done, because
We're
I've
talking
done,
about
I've done
appellate.
a lot of,
What we're talking about here are appellate issues.
I've
Yeah.
done a-
So okay, let me back up.
Set up the
since we're gonna
story.
do the
We're going to
So
do
the
it. We're going to do the
story
fucking
is
story.
Derek Chauvin was convicted. He was convicted on all counts.
We all know that.
It's a
this is
a
a story
good
we don't
day.
even need to
It's
introduce.
a positive result for this case, and it's a good outcome. However,
Unless you're
there's-
Tucker Carlson.
Or Brett Favre.
there have been questions raised as to whether or not this case is going to stick on appeal, because there were a number of issues that were raised during the course of the proceeding related to sort of outside publicity and the Judge Cahill's decision to not sequester a jury. By the way, is he related to our Judge Cahill?
I've been asking whether he's a Bobby Cahill cousin for some time.
Okay.
Bobby Cahill, best judge in Baltimore County by far. Not to besmirch anyone else. He's just big fan. I got his rookie card. I wish there were judge rookie cards with
Get it
stats
signed,
and
man.
shit.
Get that shit signed.
He's
We'll
he's
frame
a,
it in
he's
the
a fucking
office.
boss, man. Look, we got to bring this home. And what I've been telling people is stop pretending that this has not happened in Maryland. Okay, number one.
Wrong segment, dude. This ain't. I can't believe it's
No,
not
but to analyze this in a more pure framework and to take it off CNN and to stop pretend that Maxine Waters, who can't shut her fucking mouth, although I love her, is an important. We have to remember back to when Freddie Gray's death, there was a settlement of $6.4 million prior to the prosecution of any of those cases.
But
And
it was way in advance.
it
was
doesn't-
not announced.
I would argue that that's worse. I would argue that a $6.4 million judgment by the city, the highest in Baltimore City history, that lingers and languishes in the public perspective during jury selection and keeps the case on the news. And for the 6 months prior to jury selection, every time that the case is discussed, there was a reminder publicly that there was a $6.4 million settlement, is a whole lot different than coming out the day of. So I would argue that they are both bad. Secondly, in Maryland, we would go back to Doug Gansler, former Montgomery County State's attorney, also formerly the Attorney General for the state of Maryland, was reprimanded by the Attorney Grievance Commission for talking about a pending case and wishing a certain outcome. So we have seen this in Maryland with prosecutors. Prosecutors are undeniably, as Kurt has brought up on innumerable occasions on the show, they are held to a much higher standard than our elected officials. And I will let both of you dive in by saying, this is not going to be overturned. This is not going to be an issue. I don't like it. I think politicians, of which I am one, need to shut the fuck up and stay on the sidelines when it comes to tainting juries, if we have respect for the jury process and the criminal justice system, and that you can advocate for justice while not advocating for a verdict. And they are two different things. But we have seen this before with Richard Nixon. We have seen this as far back as Baltimore City with Freddie Gray. This is not new. And frankly, I think it's an issue, but I don't think it'll result in any palpable sort of sentiment on appeal.
So this is something we haven't really talked about much on the podcast, is the appellate system. Can you talk about whether or not the burden of proof is different in any way for an appeal than it is for the initial trial?
Yeah,
For
so
sure. There are
it's-
there are
it's going
different
to be
standards.
very strange and difficult because a lot of the things that they were alluding to were extraneous things that happened off the record. And so apparently and that was addressed in this article. Apparently Judge Cahill is going to allow them to supplement briefings in a motion for new trial to preserve the record for purposes of appeal. And there are, I mean, how many times do you lose appeals on waiver issues?
Mhm.
You're in the moment, in the heat of battle in a trial, and you make an objection, but maybe it's not the right grounds, or you make an objection at the wrong moment, or you don't preserve something. And appellate courts want to uphold lower courts' decisions.
They
I mean,
respect finality.
yeah, they want to close cases out as much as anybody does. And so, particularly in criminal cases, they look for reasons to close cases out.
Well, I think let me just jump in here real quickly, and I'm sorry, but Gideon, I think and I'm not saying you, because you're obviously a second-year law student at this point, but the common misperception among most non-lawyers is that an appeal is like a second bite at the apple, and it's fucking not. I mean, that's the bottom line.
It's like
They're-
eating the skin of a banana.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, once you go on appeal, and I explain this to my clients all the time, your universe is very closed. It's the same in immigration as it is in criminal or civil. Your universe is closed, and it is incredibly difficult to get an appellate court. In fact, most times the standard of review dictates that you cannot get the appeals court to take a second look at an issue. There is a huge amount of deference that's given to the trier of fact.
Right.
There's a huge amount of deference that's given to, in a criminal case, the jury. In their
And let's
in their
not confuse
deliberations and their
deference is a fun
determination.
word, but it's respect. That deference
Yeah.
is respect.
Because the
No,
appellate
so-
court was not fucking there. I tell my clients this all the time. The judge was sitting in the courtroom. The judge saw your mannerisms. The judge heard what you said. The
Well,
judge.
here, let's give them let's give the listeners a couple concrete examples, right? So the standard of review for any constitutionally related issues is de novo, which means the court is going to look at the facts that came out on the record, and they're going to make their own determination. They give zero deference to lower courts.
Brother, you are holding that mic
Constitutional
like a
issues.
blunt. What is going on there?
Second,
Like, let me yo, this is my turn.
No, I'm actually I'm
Evidentiary.
impressed here. Kurt knows his standards of review.
He always
on cri-
has,
This
man.
is good.
I
This is
mean,
interesting.
No,
I'm
my
the
issue
most
was the way he was
experienced
holding the
appellate
mic.
lawyer
No,
here,
my
right? Well,
he
except
was
for
holding it
you.
like an AR-15.
Well, but we have different standards, right? And I always I have my go-to, Ben Winograd. I know you're not listening because you're like out there. I
both
always
of
go
their
to-
standards are white privilege.
I always
if
go to
remember
Ben and be
correctly.
like, "What's the standard on this issue?"
well, how about evidence? Like rulings on evidence is abuse of discretion.
Correct.
Right.
Which means the burden is very, very high. It needs to be so obvious that the judge made the wrong call that it needs to be overturned on appeal.
The
Yep.
burden on instructions is harmless error,
Harmless error, right?
which frankly is a standard that I'm not upset with, right? Where I think I like bringing these situations closer to home because I think that it educates people a little bit more about this stuff happening here. But if you remember, prior to the Freddie Gray trial, there was a 200-page motion that was filed to transfer venue. And it was based on really a lot of the same material that we're discussing that was brought up on appeal. It was based on the voting base. It was based on the civil settlement. It was based on
Essentially, a
media.
tainted jury pool.
100%.
Yeah.
But so we've seen some of this stuff before. It is not at all new. What I think is different to discuss here, and frankly, I wondered in the Derek Chauvin case, and I'm not familiar with a lot of the pretrial motions that were litigated, but I will tell you, an inordinate amount of time was spent in Baltimore City. And we knew it was forsaken. We knew it was for appeal, which goes to I know where Kurt's going with this, which is setting yourself up for appeal. All those pretrial motions in Freddie Gray were not to win and move the case to another jurisdiction. There was not a single lawyer that represented any of the cops
create
that thought
Yep.
we're actually getting moved. It was, wow, this went national. It's on CNN. Marilyn Mosby's making a lot of very sort of emotional statements about this that go beyond the pale for a prosecutor, much like Gansler. And so we're going to set ourselves up. I didn't see any of that in Chauvin. And I
But we also
expected it.
it's halfway across the country. I mean, literally.
And
And I
there was
wasn't.
no.
I candidly, I wasn't paying attention. But you're right.
You know that
I
that
don't
happened.
recall.
100% that.
No, it was filed, but it wasn't here. Everything, and maybe because it was local, everything was a dogfight. Everything was a dogfight. And in Chauvin, from start to finish, and I will be very critical of this because I thought that defense attorney was fucking shitty. And I look, he deserved to be found guilty. I'm not saying he didn't. The evidence was completely on the state side. But from what I saw from local lawyers, Ivan, Zayon, Matt Frayling, the guys from Craymont and Graham, you know, for whatever you may think of the Freddie Gray case, you had high-end fucking lawyers that work their ass off. Tom Donnelly, who wrote a lot of the motions behind that, for real argument. And in this case, I watched the defense attorney essentially fucking lay down. Like in closing, he made what I call the Thanksgiving dinner argument. Right. And now we've seen the alternate juror come out publicly and say that, like, talking about, like, I remember Todd Oppenheim in Misdemeanor, who I have a lot of respect for. He's a public defender who writes a ton of good news articles about bail reform and stuff like that. He's a real good dude. But we used to joke around, when you're a young lawyer, you're taught to do this thing about, like, the state's attorney's going to set this plate for you. They're going to tell you the ingredients. And then, like, at the end of the case, you come back and you're like, they didn't have the ingredients to make the recipe. That's some real young lawyer shit. Like, that's what Todd and I used to joke around. That's the shit we were doing in Misdemeanor. And I'm watching a highly publicized case on national news that's all over cable TV. And I got this guy doing elementary school shit. I've done use of force cases with experts, as has Kurt. We've had some of the best foremost forensic psychologists in the country testify in our cases, and we're fairly young lawyers. And I'm watching this asshole. I mean, his lawyers. If I'm Derek Chauvin, I'm mad because I got ineffective assistance of counsel. His lawyers were fucking horrible. Well, regardless of how guilty he was, that was some of the worst lawyering I have ever fucking seen.
Well, let's spin this out just
I'm sorry,
really quickly.
I've been dying to say
No,
that.
no, that's fine. And it brings up a good point. And I think
This is why I wanted to have a longer segment.
this is quick. I think it goes to the point. The segment is about, are these appealable issues? Abso-fucking-lutely. Are they going to appeal? 100%. And if they, however the appellate system works, they're going to go as high as they can within the state of Minnesota, up the appellate chain, and then they're going to come back and they're going to file post-conviction.
All the way,
and
to
they're going to
Fargo,
pursue
baby.
every. I mean, this is a case like any other high-profile case, or not even high-profile cases that we handle here that aren't in the news. This guy is looking at what was it? 40 years,
40, 25, and 10.
He's going to have a lot of fucking time on his hands, and disgustingly, probably a lot of people throwing money at him to throw money at lawyers to pursue. This case is not going away. It's going to go out of the headlines. We're not going to read about it, but it's not going away.
An
But
interesting
we got
thing
what
for people to look at.
and when
though.
I say we, I mean America, the American judicial system, and most people in this country got what they needed earlier this week.
Well,
and then everything that happens from this point forward,
people will forget about.
Yep.
Mohammed Noor. If you haven't read about him, please read about him. They have had a prior police shooting in Minnesota. And to me, the most interesting thing, the only thing that I think will come up on appeal will be that Mohammed Noor was another police shooting where they brought up third-degree murder and wanted their court of appeal to rule as to whether certain instances of fact would be a sufficient basis to find that person guilty. And the court didn't want to rule on it. So I think the one thing that I've read about that I do think is interesting is, will this be an opportunity for that specific charge? Because what Brett Favre got in trouble for, because he's a fucking idiot, because whenever you're in sports and you comment publicly on some shit you ain't a lawyer for, you sometimes get called out, was the counts were really different, right? It was recklessly engaging in conduct. Are you really chewing with a microphone in front of you? This guy's eating peanuts and shit like we're at the circus. It was, did you recklessly endanger him by sitting on him and having your hands in your pockets and not paying attention, and then cause his death, which was
recklessly,
the second and third charge, right?
intentionally,
Or the top charge, which was, did you commit a third-degree assault? Did you, or in Maryland, which is more equates to a second-degree assault, did you intentionally cause harm, offensively touch an individual with an intent to do so, which then resulted in their death? That's the one that's going to go up. And so, knowing that they've already had a prior police shooting with a similar issue, and the court didn't want to take a stance on it, the only issue in my mind is, does the court take this case and say, well, this is the second time it's happened, maybe we should take a look at it? Because earlier in this case, we already had third-degree murder go up and come down.
No,
Remember
they're
that.
not. No, they're not.
I'm just telling you,
No.
during this case, third-degree murder went up and came back down and was back at it. That's why the trial was delayed. So I'm telling you, I'm not saying you're wrong, but if there's one charge that we need to pay attention to that's been circling the drain, so to speak, it's that fucking charge. I feel like we're on CNN. Is Van Jones crying? How many zip-ups does Gideon
All right,
have?
what do we
on?
think of the old-fashioned?
Clarissa makes
Always
a
good.
phenomenal drink. She's a wonderful associate. She's a better bartender than you, Kurt.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I'll say I told you guys before the show that I was following a recipe of a certain local distillery that shall still remain nameless, and they add seltzer to their old fashioned. And so I threw a little seltzer in there, and I thought that was a really nice addition to brighten it up a little bit and get a little tingle on the palate. I also used both orange simple syrup and orange bitters, as well as orange peel. Orange being the traditional old fashioned over the cherry. It may have been a little too much. I'm gonna be honest. I think I should have gone with either the Angostura bitters or with just regular simple syrup. It was.
You were like halfway to an orange Julius.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of throwing a little club soda or seltzer on top of a cocktail And I think that's a great idea. I'm gonna next time I make an old fashioned, I think I'll do that. as
Adam
well.
was supposed to get us locally sourced cherries.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we'll hopefully
Stand
be
by
looking
for
forward
that.
to that on a
So
future
we-
podcast.
Also, we want to obviously give a huge shout out for Kimberly Prescott, Prescott HR, for coming on the show and joining us. We have a very special guest next week.
We have our first judge coming on the podcast
We
now,
do.
and
Very excited.
I'm gonna make a motion on the floor since we have a quorum. We have been making fun of Judge George Littman.
Not making fun of you.
Either way, I drank arbitrary and capricious. And we have our first judge on, federal judge George Hazel, who was deputy state's attorney for Baltimore City. He was a U.S. attorney prior to that, and he is currently a United States federal district court judge sitting in Greenbelt. We will be discussing policy and policy only. We will not be discussing politicians. We will not be discussing specific cases. And we will ensure that one of my favorite people in the world remains to be a sitting judge. So tune in next week, pour yourself a drink. And if you think HR, we were more appropriate, wait until you see us in front of our federal judge.
I promise not to wear a hoodie when we have a judge on. I promise to dress appropriately.
We'll be standing up the whole time. Every time I talk to him,
Every time, yeah.
Can I have sitting objections? Are they okay?
We should that would be fucking hilarious if we stood up every time we asked him.
My favorite thing about him, and I'm going to leave everyone with a teaser because this is by far he's not a drinker. We're not going to do a special cocktail, but my favorite story about him is he has a wonderful sense of humor. And when the movie Soul came out during COVID, he put up a post up and he goes, "If everyone can just stop telling me that I look like the main character for Soul, my kids and my wife have already told me, leave me the fuck alone." And with that, please look up George Hazel. He's a great judge. He's a great fan. And I very much so look forward to having him on.
I think you just planned our Instagram post to tease that,
Thanks,
that
man.
episode.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Lawyers on the Rocks. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed making. Again, a big shout out to Kimberly Prescott for joining us. HR and Cocktails, Prescott HR. You can check them out on Instagram. You can check us out on Instagram or on Facebook. Shoot us an email, lawyersontheRocks@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, in the meantime, till the next time, pour yourself a drink. Till the next episode of Lawyers on the Rocks.